Awesome. We got Ben Speech over here from Speech Consulting. Really impressive what you have got going on online. So, let's say a larger organization does an M&A, merger acquisition to a smaller company, but now this smaller company needs to mature, evolve, right? All those people coming over, you have teams that you need to organize, and you can help with a lot of those services across that spectrum. Am I right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Thanks for chatting today. Yeah, it can be through an acquisition, growth, realizing that they're trying to scale or grow. It can be done because of an exit and you're trying to sell the company and trying to make sure all of your things are buttoned up and wrapped up and nice and pretty for someone else.
Nice. Okay. So what companies have you worked with recently that we can kind of deep dive into a little bit more?
Yeah, there's a few. I have two kind of audiences, I'll say. One audience is I'm here in Austin, Texas, and so one of those audiences are local service and trades companies. And a lot of times those groups are smaller firms that are solopreneur, or maybe there's one or two other people in but the majority of their staff is whether it be crews or, outsourced contractors or something. And those are more one-off kind of initial assessment and then maybe a revisit once a quarter or even once a month type of engagements. And then my other kind of focus is on companies that have, I usually say, probably 4 million up in revenue and have a couple people on their executive team. The executive team is actually more of the indicator, but when you start to have that smaller circle of higher level thinkers in your team that are, with the founder or even the CEO, that's when I can come in and really help those teams move in the right direction. That engagement is on a weekly basis. So I'm there every single week, sitting down, tracking what's going, what happened the previous week, and then helping them plan what to do in the following week.
Nice. Well, yeah, a lot of folks that are, listening should realize that this is an incredibly valuable service that you bring because it's based on experience. When an entrepreneur gets a little bit bigger, right, just expands. Let's just say they don't even have to double, but just like a little bit bigger. They have an employee, they might have two, they might have additional customers, and it quickly gets out of hand. Like this problem set exponentially gets worse, right? It's not like just like, oh, two more things today. No, it's like it goes from 1 to 10 to 100. And then it's like, where's that Ben? How do we get a hold of them? Because when you walk in, you're able to, one, organize their thought process and to start thinking in hopefully like processes, right? Stages, stovepipes, like whatever the pipeline is as you're moving them across. Can you walk through some of your like thought processes and ideology on how do you help them kind of organize their thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of directions, right? And it all starts with that kind of big question of that 10-year plan. And the 10-year plan is very, it's never attainable, right? Every year it's a new, where are you going to be from 10 years? Because that 10-year picture changes quite often, but it also drives where you're trying to go.
Right.
But then once you get that kind of ideal of, I want to sell the company, I want to grow the company, I want to franchise the company, we look a little closer to like a 3-year picture. And 3 years, the first time when we start getting some numbers involved, mainly revenue and profit, but like a McDonald's, it could be 1 million hamburgers served or whatever it is. So we put those numbers together, and then you start looking within the company from the top-down view of the accountability structure, not necessarily the hierarchy. And those are two different kind of charts. They're similar but different. On the accountability structure, there's no people's names. These are just roles. So you could have 10 project managers, but you have one role of project management. And the first thing to do that kind of takes a bit is to really look at each role within the company and what success looks like in that role. And I think that's a really interesting question when you ask people, and it can be from an engagement, it can be from a contractor perspective. Somebody's going to redo my website, or someone's going to be my cybersecurity person. When you say, what does success look like for you? That's a very individual thing to that owner or to that CEO of the company. And it has to almost not be anymore, your perspective. It has to be what it is. And we have to define that so everybody involved knows that's what success looks like. And it's a whole can of worms when you go down that path
Yes,
of, there's people in roles, I'm sure, that are out there who don't know what success looks like to their manager in their role, right?
exactly.
They may think they know what success looks like, but does your manager share that view with you of what success looks like?
Exactly.
And
They're like,
until
what do you
you're
mean?
aligned, like, it's going to
Yeah.
be a very rough,
It's like, no, I show up to work on Monday and then I leave on Friday. What do you mean success
yeah,
criteria? Like,
yeah,
things aren't
yeah,
on fire. Isn't that successful enough for you, Ben?
yeah,
Who hired you
exactly.
anyway? Like,
Sometimes that is the first, that first level of success is stop having things on fire.
oh my
But
gosh.
then, yeah, that's one of the first things that I kind of sit down with people and do is, what does success look like at 10 years, 3 years, 1 year, and each of the roles that are within your company. So I'd love to start there, and that takes a long time to unpack usually.
Yes, and I think we kind of scratched the surface a little bit there. The emotions start coming out because one, people have to start externalizing their thoughts. You started with the CEO, like in their mind, success looks like maybe numbers in a bank account, or maybe it's, you know, uh, the least amount of complaints from customers, or the highest number of reviews.
Yeah,
Products sold. You mentioned 1 million burgers. Well, once you start externalizing it, then it starts becoming a little bit more real. And maybe your reality is not jiving with what you had in your mind either, right? So there's
yeah,
a little bit of an emotional barrier there going, I don't know, I don't feel so comfortable writing this down and sharing with the whole company. And then on the other side, when you start interacting with all of the team members and they start questioning Ben, right? Like, what are you doing here? Bringing up things from the past, airing dirty laundry, and so on. So, how do you cope with some of the emotional aspect? Because you're going to deep dive into this from like day one, if not earlier.
yeah, yeah. It's pretty amazing. I think one of my favorite things that happens when we do these exercises is when people actually start saying no to certain things, which is kind of a reverse, of course. But like if I define a role from what that founder and even the team came up with and start defining these different roles and say, here's what these different roles are and what we expect them to do, what they're accountable for, and what success looks like for each of those roles. And then we start asking the people who were in that role before we started the exercise. And you got to ask them three things. And there's three big questions, right? You say, do you understand what this role is? And yeah, we have it defined now. I understand what it is. And you go, great. Do you want it? And it's a very interesting question because I love when people say no. I think it's great when someone can recognize, holy cow, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's really, really powerful. I've seen it when we define roles for sales managers or for your highest performing salesperson, which is a very common thing. And you say, oh, well, they're a great performance in a salesperson. I'm going to make them now a sales manager. And they go, yeah, sales manager, right? More money. Absolutely. And all of a sudden they realize, I don't like managing people. I like digging in the weeds. I like creating the solutions and coming out with that client and going, look what we just created, and then get the sale. That's what I would like. I actually don't like to manage people. And so when people can go, holy cow, that's the role. No, I don't want that. It's so powerful, and such a shift in their entire meeting is so interesting when people go, wait, we can say no to things. And now you can start actually finding the role that you're going to succeed at. So
That's right.
it's a very opening, like almost releasing, therapeutic kind of thing when you can say, hey, I don't want to do that.
Let's pull that thread a little bit. So
Yeah.
in that same scenario, right? High performing salesperson, meeting all of the quotas, excelling at what they do. Now you've essentially taken them as a CEO, promote them into a manager, like, hey, I want you to take your skills and then teach everybody else, right? And then manage and make sure that they're doing exactly what you're doing. So instead of one person, I now have 5 outperformers. And that may be what the CEO is thinking. But then that role, let's just call him John. John comes over and is like, yeah, there's more money. And maybe there's some like honeymoon phase where like the first 2 weeks is amazing. Hey, I'm in charge, this and that. But then sooner or later, they speak to a Ben and realize, hey, I don't really want this job. So what is the appropriate move, 2 months before? Is it the promotion? Is it just give them higher commission? Like what should that CEO have done?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes, and it's probably, I'll say it a few more times on here, is defining that role's success. Because what you're measuring, or what you should have been measuring in that role, that salesperson role, is not only what does success look like, but how you're going to measure success is with KPIs and OKRs, which are very boring and can get very confusing. But what it is, you're measuring the habits that are going to deliver that success. And your number one salesperson is probably just doing those. They're probably doing all of those habits, and they don't know that those are the things that they're doing that are driving the success. And so diving down with that high performing salesperson and saying, walk me through your day, tell me what you're doing, how do you handle this, how do you do that? It's a little bit boring, and it can feel like the office space interview of,
What would you say you do around here?
But once you can figure out, here's the things that our high performing salespeople are doing that are driving these measures of success and having them hit success. Now all we have to do is train the other people to do those habits. And you can train an entry level person to do those habits and make them a habit for them. They can get better at them, but once you get them into the habit of doing the right things, now that onboarding program is so much smoother. Your mid-level people start becoming high performing, and your high performing people get rewarded with high performance commissions and other things that are part of their job. Any one of them, then, once you have that managerial role defined, they know, hey, either I'm really good at sales, but I'm kind of tired of it, or, hey, you know what? I actually do like coaching other people much better than I actually like performing the things, even though I know how to do them. Maybe I want to be doing that sort of thing. And so now it becomes a much easier yes or no kind of conversation with those high performers on, do you want to keep doing this, or do you want to step into a role that we've had defined as a managerial one?
And something real quick, I'll ask you. So is there like a disclaimer beforehand when you interview these folks to say, hey, just speak openly, your job's not at risk, I promise?
Right. I mean, I should start saying that if I don't already. But I do say in those meetings that I have, it needs to be something where you are not the person in the role anymore. So if I do this workshop, I typically start any engagement with a 5 or 6 hour workshop. It's like a full day of deep diving into all of these things. And anybody who wants to be a part of that the CEO, deems necessary, is in that room. And the first conversation is, we are not in our job descriptions right now. We are all on the board that is looking down at this company, and we are going to talk about how this company works. And so you may talk about a role that you're in and go, oh, well, that sales manager role, I'm not really sure it's defined very well. And everyone's going to kind of look at you a little bit and go, that's your role. And you're going to go, I know, I'm not sure I know what you all want me to be doing. And let's make sure we have that defined, because I've been in that role and I know that that's one of those issues. But let's do that from the outside. It's very defensive if you're in there from inside and someone says, well, what are you doing all day?
Exactly.
But instead you say, hey, this is the senior VP of sales. Let's define what the senior VP of sales is supposed to do. And then you first do that exercise. And so it's a very interesting, and it usually takes a little bit for the team to realize this is a safe space and we can have those conversations. But it even starts before that to make sure that that safe space is there, is talking to the CEO one-on-one and bringing up the Jim Collins good to great conversation of, are the right people on the bus?
Right. And
that is the very, very first thing before all of this is, if you have the right people on your bus, it doesn't matter what seat they sit in. Right? They can move seats. They can get up, mid-year and switch with each other and move back. But if they're the right people, then they need to be there. It's a different little conversation if the answer to that is, I don't know. Then we kind of have to, behave a little differently in that meeting.
Wow, that's very powerful what you said at the end. Are the right people on the bus? And that's going to require a little bit of introspection as well, because the CEO is the one responsible for hiring the people. So you're really asking them, can you call yourself out, right? And maybe that's a judgment of character as well, to say, are you willing to admit that you were wrong? Because then we can define the problem better and then ultimately get to a solution. as
Yeah.
opposed to becoming defensive right then and there in the office going, I got the best people, Ben. What are you talking
Yeah.
about? I hired all of them myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you go through that exercise, 5, 6
Mhm.
hours. How long does this process typically take? Or do you have like different chunks based on the company? And then what is that end product or result that you deliver?
Right. So that first meeting is one to really understand the landscape, of where we are. And then it typically is one day. I've done more than one day in a row if that first day we're really, exploring something else. But it typically does just take one day. And then once we get that set up, we all walk away with a 1-year plan through the end of the year, whichever, year we're talking about. But at this point, like in Q4, we should be doing this for 2026. And so right now, that's what I'm telling everybody is like, do this 1-day workshop with me, not for this year. This year's too late, right? We're going to end the year kind of how we're going to end the year at this point. There may be some small tweaks, of course, but for the most part, we already know what's happening. So this is all for 2026. So we walk away with a full year understanding of what goals we have for that year in all of those major departments. Right. So if your sales and marketing are under one roof, that's, one department, but we have our goals for the year. Then we break that down into quarterly goals and typically just the first quarter. Because one of the problems I do see a lot of companies have is they'll map out quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, and they go, great, we had everything set. And then they miss Q1.
Yeah.
And now
Everything
Q1's
is done.
off.
The train is off the tracks.
Exactly. And so I always just say it's one of those like taglines of, let's just do the first next step, right? So we're just going to do Q1. We know what the year looks like and we know what Q1 looks like. That'll determine Q2, 3, and 4. So you walk away with that. Once that's done in that meeting, I do the last 30 minutes of the meeting. I do a very condensed version of your weekly meeting that you need to be doing with your team. Now, I can run that meeting, and that's one where for my larger, clients, the 4 million and up and executive team ones, I'd say like I need to be a part of that for at least the next 3 months. And every week I run the meeting. It's a very structured agenda, but you go through what your quarterly rocks are, quarterly goals, and you say, are you on track, or is anything weird? Are we completely off? Do we throw that goal away all of a sudden? But for the most part, yes, we're on track. Then you go down and say, each of those major departments, we're going to look at those measurements of success that we talked about and those habits for those measurements and put them onto a card and say, this is our scorecard, right? So if your team is supposed to call 100 people a week, did you call 100 people a week?
Right.
And you go through each one of those things. If anything's off, we put that on what's called the issues list. And then you have a discussion at the end of the meeting, which should really be the bulk of the meeting, is here's the issues for the week. And the issues for the week can be good issues, right? We had an amazing client that wants to take all of our resources and pay us tons of money. That's an issue. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Or, something didn't go so well. Let's talk about that and figure out why it didn't go so well. So that's the bulk of that meeting. And that needs to happen every single week. And then that's what I would be a part of. And then usually after that first quarter, that first 90-day engagement, I'll do one more, which during that time, I'll start stepping out a little bit. So I don't want to be a part of every team forever. I like to eventually kind of walk myself out and say, great, now you're up and running on your own. You guys can go ahead and do this. But that doesn't fit every single person. That's just kind of the ideal. So there are people that I know who are like, hey, I love working with you. Let's do a 2-year engagement. And I'm like, I'm happy to do that if that's necessary. I have other people who say, yeah, just come on for that first 3 months and then, that's great. I know my people that I want to do this with. Why don't you just train them how to do it? So that's the initial kind of interaction that I set up.
So as you're stepping out, somebody has to hold the reins, and so there might be some overlap or training requirement there. What does that look like? Is it human resources stepping in? How do you kind of nominate that person?
It's a person who can, one, take the emotion out of a lot of things, but then two, like hold other people accountable, which is really, really tricky because you have to be a little direct. You have to have a little bit of that radical candor. to say to somebody, hey, you didn't hit your rock, or you didn't hit your goal for the quarter, or hey, if you're off, like you're off 2 weeks in a row, 2 weeks in a row, we need to sit down and have a conversation on what's happening. Is it something
Mhm.
you're doing? Is it a personal situation? Are you not, working well with somebody else? What do we have to do to get you back on track? And that can be a difficult conversation for some people to have. They don't always enjoy
Sure.
doing it. And a lot of times it comes down to, I like to use Patrick Lencioni's Working Genius, if you've read that book, but it's an amazing book. There's 6 types of working genius, which is really, it's not a personality test. It's not a DISC or a Myers-Briggs or anything like that. It's more about what type of work gives you energy. And
Oh,
so there's 6 different styles. There's everything from, I'm the ideator,
right.
who likes to walk through the world and says, hey, there has to be a better way that this should be happening. Let's think about ways that this could be better. And then they can just throw ideas out. And there's a person then that they work really well with, which is called that discernment, who can take that idea and go, that one sounds crazy. Maybe we don't do that.
Okay.
Or, hey, that one has legs. Let's start exploring things we can do. And then you bring in your inventor, and the inventor's there going, okay, let's get into the weeds a little bit about what this would look like. So there's all these kind of personality types. And so you have to have, I think, for an integrator, or for that person who's going to run around and really take that CEO's ideas, take the rest of the team, keep them on track, keep them moving in that direction, checking in every single week. Are we doing the right things? You have to have what Patrick calls enablement,
Mm.
where you're really driving home with everybody, hey, this is the place we're going. We're going that way. Let's keep going
Right.
that way. You have to walk around and do that. And then tenacity. And tenacity is, there's something that needs to be done. I'm going to make sure it gets done.
Right.
And that's tough, and not everybody has those 2 things. And I think those are really key to identify within your own team. Who's that person that if you're like, hey, I don't know what it is or how we're going to do it, but here's a project, and someone goes, I'll take it, let's go, and they just are off and running. Those are good people to have sit in that kind of coordinating kind of role between the
I
executive.
see. So what you're saying sounds like every company needs this,
Yeah.
and there's only like one of you, for example, or
Yeah.
however many companies are out there offering this service. What if a company had a dedicated role for exactly what you're saying? Where would that sit within that company? Like, what would be their title, their responsibilities?
Right. So in that world, it typically, when you're looking at that accountability chart, not the hierarchy, right? Not who reports to who, but as far as the accountability goes, who's accountable for all of these things, that person is second. The top person is the founder, CEO, visionary. This is why it sometimes appeals to the founders, is they don't really have a lot of accountability. They are in that visionary, they're the idea people. They're usually looking at really big picture of
Right.
things, right? And then once they do that and they kind of put the flag out there, right, of like, hey,
Mhm.
I usually, like, again, with going back to Jim Collins getting people on the bus, I go, it's like you're driving from LA to New York,
Okay.
right? The founder CEO is going to say, let's go to New York, and they're going to
Right.
put that out there as the flag. The person I'm talking about is called the integrator, and that person is more of like the actual bus driver going, we're going to go to New York, but we got to stop and get gas every so often. We got to find a
Right.
place to stay every so often. A bunch of people want to go see the biggest ball of yarn. Let's just do that little quick, and then we're going to swing back into and keep heading to New York. So that's where that person sits, is at the very top of that hierarchy. They have the accountability to make sure everybody's doing the things they said they're going to do, delivering a lot other numbers and things like that. Now, when the numbers are off, they're not accountable to necessarily correct them. They're accountable to bring up to the team the numbers are off.
I
That's what that
see.
person's expected to do, is to say, hey,
Right.
I'm raising a flag here that, John's not performing, or at least maybe it's not that John's not performing. John's not delivering the numbers that we thought he was going to deliver. And then we
Exactly.
go, well, let's figure out why. We thought cold calling was going to be the end all be all answer. It doesn't seem to be working. Maybe we should try something else, or we have to figure out if it's just not the right people. So that's where then that deep diving conversations really go in that meeting.
Gotcha. I was spot on. I couldn't agree more. I was shaking my head and smiling, and this is exactly what, I kind of did in the military. And
Sure.
believe it or not, the title actually had the word integrator in it as well. And,
Hmm.
it's spot on exactly what you're talking about. And the example of mentioning that John's not meeting the thing, but then correcting it to say, it's more like the numbers aren't there. So now let's figure out why the numbers aren't there. And when you peel back the onion,
Hmm.
maybe it's some other thing like, hey, this system wasn't updated on Tuesday when we said it was going to be updated. And so the root cause could be completely separate than
Yeah.
John's not performing. And then somebody has a knee jerk reaction in HR and says, well, John is out of here, right?
Yeah.
And then that doesn't help anybody. So it's helpful that this integrator position is what you're recommending. And so from an accountability standpoint, I know you mentioned it's not hierarchy. That person would essentially work for the CEO or the highest person there,
Yeah.
and then wield a little bit of that authority, right? Because people still need to listen to you and answer
Yes.
questions at least. And then identify the flags or the issues that we are not meeting, the key performance indicators that we're not meeting, and then raise the flag, right? You're not the problem solver. You're just highlighting, hey, here's a problem, you document it, and then you kind of move on. Okay. How do you document? Like going back to that earlier meeting a little bit, because that's a
Yeah.
lot of information coming at you.
It is.
You have to kind of filter it a little bit. Some of it's emotional, some of it's
Yeah.
like factual. And then you have to be able to organize that into some way where you can understand it, interpret it, and then maybe even regurgitate it right back to them.
Yeah. 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 There's software out there. There's a software I really like called 90.io, 90 spelled out .io. They built an online platform for it, which is really, really great. But I've done it just on Excel sheets. I just do a big Excel sheet and you have the agenda in there, and then you have the tabs for what are the issues, the status of those issues. Did we solve them? Did the issue need a to-do? So we solved the issue by, Ben needed to go find more information, or, hey, John wasn't getting the information in time. We need to go, walk through that process with a few other people to figure out where that thing wasn't getting updated. And so there might be to-dos in there, and then you circle back in the following meeting to go, hey, the to-dos from last week were, 1, 2, 3, 4. Where did we end on those, and what's next? And so it can absolutely be done in an Excel sheet. The great thing about a lot of these softwares that like 90 is they integrate with other things. So if you have Slack, if you have Gmail, if you have Outlook, they'll remind you of those things. And so when I'm working with those companies, and for me, if I'm working with multiple companies, my calendar still shows all of the things that I needed to be doing or all of my tasks that I needed to do that week. So it really is nice to have things like that put together. Same from a technology perspective, there's that one. There's a few other ones out there, but that's the one I've used the most.
Yeah, I like that a lot. In fact, I like that for your sales pitch itself to say,
Right.
I would kind of flip that paradigm a little bit and say, we are not coming in with Excel spreadsheets and Word documents. We are coming in with artificial intelligence that's
Yeah.
going to be able to take in multiple inputs, synthesize that data, organize it, like all of these, meeting, note-taking software. There's some where you can just like kind of wear as well, and then
Yep.
they listen to all the conversations, they organize it all. That would be a huge selling point, I think, because
Yeah.
then your one-day meetings go down to just a short conversation, and it's no longer that serial motion of I get an input, everybody watches me type this in an Excel spreadsheet, and then we go
No.
on to the next question. And so it's like this
Yeah.
little stop and go thing.
Yep.
Whereas maybe you could have multiple conversations going on at the same time, and the AI, maybe multiple AIs, are just organizing it all based on your prompt, right? So you've
Yeah.
already told the AI how to organize, how to synthesize it, come up with
Yeah.
issues, identify problem areas, and then provide recommendations. And then you come back on the tail end and you say, okay, thanks for that argument, that happened for 3 hours straight. Here are my 5 key points, and here are my
Yep.
recommendations on how to move out. And then here's the plan, right? And you just kind
Yeah.
of, and then I think
No,
that would be,
absolutely. I think that's that's a great idea for, again, an application for AI. And the great part about what you brought up is not that even my role is getting replaced, right? It's that the role that we have is using AI to be able to do multiple things at the same time, but then still have like that focus of like a one-on-one. And I think that's a big thing for a lot of these AI solutions is people have this argument of this thing's going to replace my job, and it's not the case. It should enhance how you're able to do your job more efficiently. And that's it. Yeah, it's an exactly great kind of example of that.
Yeah, yeah, spot on. I like what you said there at the end. It's basically enhancing what you're doing, because at the end of the day, you still need a Ben. You still need the mindset, the experience. You wrote the prompt for the
Right,
AI.
right.
And then, okay, so what if it can write an amazing report? Who's going to interpret it? What does it
Yeah,
mean? Like, do
yeah,
we really have to do all these 10 things, or can we prioritize them? Okay, well,
yeah,
who's going to prioritize them? Who has the contextual data about the business in order to understand that priority one, it's really priority one. And
yeah,
it's not just because a group of people in a room came up with it, right? It has to be tied to KPIs, has to be tied
yeah,
to experience, has to be tied to the vision, like you were saying, for the CEO who
yeah,
wants to go to New York, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a huge upsell for sure. And then,
absolutely.
so on the tail end, are you providing some kind of a report, these action items? Like,
Mhm.
what does that look like for the company?
Yeah, there's kind of different ways. One is if I'm doing a 1-day workshop deep dive, what I actually started doing is I created a GPT that spits out a report, and that has all of these things in there. Like, what are your core values? What's your mission? Where are you going? 1-year targets, 90 days. Is a big, long report at the end of the day that that I give them.
Mhm.
But I built a GPT to scrub your website
Mhm.
and pull in as much of that data that it possibly could find. Now, the funny thing about that is if someone says, "Oh yeah, we have core values," but they're not on the website, it will try to create core values
Okay,
based on your website.
there you go.
And I did a session last Tuesday with somebody, and they had no core values listed, and they had no mission listed. They had no, like, even marketing, target market, things like that. There was some stuff on there, but it wasn't, very specifically listed. This is our core values. And so I ran it before I went into that meeting, and I had it all on my phone. And so then I asked him, like, "Hey, first we're going to go through your core values." And he didn't quite know what I meant. And so I started giving examples, and he goes, "Okay, I think it's these 3 things." And he listed them off. And we get done with that meeting. We got to a coffee break, and I said, "Hey, just a heads up, I did this. Do you want to see what AI thinks your core values are?" And he listed 3 of the 4 that AI found.
Nice. There you
Like, I
go.
mean, it was so cool. And so what I usually do in these meetings, I take that AI kind of scrub data, and then I record our meetings and pull a lot of this stuff out. I take all the notes, I take pictures of all the notes, and between the recordings, the picture for my own references of, sometimes I'm not always the best penmanship person, but I'll take the pictures and I take that AI thing and I then generate this, like more substantial report, but it also has like the suggestion. So if I
Okay.
ask somebody, "What are your core values?" and we don't have them, you come up with 3, it might identify 1 or 2 more that say, you might also want to talk about this or that. And so, yeah, that's usually that 1-day workshop. That's what they walk away with. It takes me about a day to re-scrub all of that stuff and get it polished up. But
Okay.
in the longer engagements, that document is very much a working document that we reference back constantly. And so if we use it for a lot of different reasons. If you have your core values defined, you should be making business decisions for partnerships, acquisition, even major clients should be weighted against those core values. So if
Mm,
something doesn't fit your core values, you shouldn't be doing it. And
there you
so
go.
it should be part of your weekly conversations, that our major directions should be, well, does this still fit with our core values? And if it doesn't, then that's a really big discussion.
That's a
Because
phenomenal
you
idea.
pick them for a
I
reason,
like
right?
that. Hmm.
So,
Exactly, because it gives the company vision, company direction, but then also that part of the company is external customers doing business with your company. And
yeah,
you kind of get judged by the friends you keep, right? And I think it goes with
absolutely.
business as well. So
Absolutely.
this 1-day session course, how are you charging for that? Like, what is your price model? Is it hourly? Is it the full day?
It's just I just do a flat fee. So it's kind of just a 1-day fee, and that's all I charge. And then the end of that's where I really kind of do like explain like what are the other tiers are. And I even in this last email I sent to this guy, on, last Wednesday. I sent him the email and I even texted it to him, but I said, like, called it out in like very, very bold letters. This is the only sales pitch that I'm going to do,
Yeah.
right? Here's all your stuff. And that we already took care of that payment, but this is the sales pitch. Here's my additional thing, my services that I offer for ongoing engagement and things like that if it's needed. And I said, otherwise it just becomes a once a year, hey, time to go and have our conversation with Ben again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I usually just do a flat fee for the day.
Okay, so two questions. One is, what is that flat fee? And then two, how does somebody get on your schedule?
Yeah, so flat fee is $1,500 for the day. Right now, I'm running specials for end of the year because people need to be doing this, and I've been part of too many companies that say our January, we're gonna have our January kickoff, and that's when we do it. And I'm like, well, then you're only running on 11 months.
Yeah,
Like, this is way too late to be doing it in January. You need to do it now. And there can be caveats for how certain things end up, but for the most part, what next year is already going to look like. So do it now. And then, website, if you go to speichconsulting.com, you can go there and get it. If you find me on socials or any of the other things, just, direct message and say, hey, when do we have time? And then it's just a scheduling thing. I've done them virtually. That's a fun way to do it. There's a really cool software that I have that allows multiple people to be like in a big whiteboard together.
Okay.
But I love in person. Like, I think nothing really beats that in person time, especially if we go kind of after the meeting's over. You still get some hangout time because there's always going to be that residual thoughts that are kind of kicking around. And so it's like, we're done with the
really
meeting.
Good. Exactly.
Yeah.
For the companies that are thinking about hiring Ben, here's something to consider is $1,500, by the way, is like really cheap considering even for like smaller businesses, it's a huge investment to get that stuff organized. Because the moment you're talking about, a million burgers sold or whatever KPI you come up with, 1,500 is a drop in a bucket.
Yeah.
And so you have to invest in your people to get that now. And then if you pay for Ben to show up and, hopefully spend the night so you can take him out to dinner, then you get that invaluable, intangible information where you can just pick his brain all through dinner. Like, he's not going to say, like, oh, no, charge, I gotta charge you for that. It's just free information at that. So really you get 1,500 and then you just add your travel cost to it, put you in a hotel. And then, keep feeding them those drinks and you get that free information.
Right. Yeah.
Out.
And that's why I love doing those 2 days. Like, that's the fun part about if somebody really does want to do this. When I've been part of companies on multi-year engagements, that once a year meeting becomes a 2-day meeting. And you can do some fun workshops, you can do like trust falls and, those sort of things, kind of things. But it is fun to kind of get somewhere on day one, go out to dinner, have those conversations, and then come in on day 2 and go, remember what we were talking about last night? But you have those conversations, and those little pieces are sometimes like some of the greatest sparks for change within the company.
Exactly right. Man, so much more I can talk to you about, but we got to end it here. So we'll put all of your information in the description below. We know the cost, we know where to find you. Thank you very much, Ben. I really appreciate you taking the time coming out here.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll stay tuned in. Any parting shots before we end this?
Great shots. No, I always just tell people, I'm saying on socials all the time, but I also tell them in person. I said it today to somebody, is if you're scared, if you're tired, if you're unmotivated, just do it anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's sometimes like pulling the trigger is sometimes the act that gives you the motivation. And so there's a lot of these different things where people are either embarrassed to have to do these meetings. Somebody today told me that they would have engaged me earlier, but they were too embarrassed to admit that they needed the meeting. I'm like, buddy, successful companies are doing this meeting all the time. So you need to do it at some point. If it's not with me, it's with your own team, but it's definitely something that needs to be done.
Yeah. So for those that are on the fence, just get it done. Listen to Ben. Call him.
Absolutely.
All right.
Exactly.
Thanks, brother. Really appreciate you doing this.